Hey, it's Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver, and the Cult here on the Vinyl Guide.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Matt. And hey, everyone, it's Nate here. Welcome to episode 292 of the Vinyl Guide, the podcast for the record and music nerd in all of us. And today we are experiencing vinyl with the drum legend himself, Mr. Matt Sorum. Now, you may know Matt from his years with Guns N' Roses, The Cult, Velvet Revolver, and more, but what you may not know is that Matt not only has a vinyl subscription service, experiencevinyl.com, but he also has a brand new autobiography coming out, Double Talkin Jive, on rarebirdlit.com. There's autographed books and vinyl up there. You could also get the book on your Kindle when you purchase it from the website that was founded by the guy who recently wrote a penis-shaped rocket into space. But I strongly urge you to get your copy at rarebirdlit.com, or you can order Matt's Double Talkin Jive book from your local independent bookstore. Now today, Matt and I talk all about his new book, his time in Guns N' Roses, some Velvet Revolver, what's rotating on his turntable these days. We talk about Matt's Experience vinyl subscription service, his recent collaboration on Billy Gibbons' solo LP hardware, and lots more. Plus, I want to extend a huge congratulations to Matt and his wife Ace on the arrival of their beautiful baby girl, Lou Ellington Sorum. She arrived shortly after we had this interview and has no doubt kept the family occupied and busy ever since. So, please know that when you buy a copy of Matt's book, Double Talkin Jive, you'll not only get a book full of tales of Matt's incredibly fascinating life, but part of the proceeds also go towards baby food and nappies. And those things don't pay for themselves. So, grab a copy of Double Talkin Jive at rarebirdlit.com. Plus, if you enjoy this interview, please subscribe to the Vinyl Guide podcast. You'll get full access to nearly 300 episodes and interviews with the likes of vinyl maniacs like Fred Armisen, Ian MacKaye, Glenn Hughes, Michael Schenker, Jay Bentley of Bad Religion, Robert Trujillo of Metallica, John Sanders of Alarum, and hundreds more. Plus, you can also help support us on Patreon. For the cost of a couple burritos each month, you'll get access to extended interviews, early access to episodes, secret episodes, and of course that warm, fuzzy feeling you get by helping support your buddy Nate here and the Vinyl Guide podcast. That's patreon.com/Vinyl Guide, and thanks in advance for your support. Alrighty, let's get into some Double Talkin Jive with the legend himself, Mr. Matt Sorum. So, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show, mate. And look, I've been following your more recent movements, especially with the new Billy Gibbons LP. I mean, I absolutely love this album, and I want to talk about this as well as the new book. But before we start, I want to hear from you. Tell me your best drummer joke.
Ha! I've only heard them told about me. Okay, this guy goes on safari in Africa, and every day they go out, they're looking for elephants and rhinos and lions, and they come back at night and they hear da-dum, 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 da-dum. That guy said, what is that? I can't sleep. And there's a chief, the chief of Africa, the chief of the village. He goes to the chief. He says, Chief, what's that sound? He goes, when drums stop, very, very bad. And then the next day they go on safari again. They come back that night. They're trying to sleep. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. What is that? Scaring me. Goes to the chief. Chief, what is that sound? And the chief says, when drums stop, very, very bad. Next day, safari again, they see some rhinos, they see some giraffes, they see all these beautiful African animals. That night, he lays down in his bed again and he hears the drums. The drums stop. He said, oh my God, the drums have stopped. Now what? And he runs to the chief. He says, Chief, the drums stop. Now comes bass solo. You ever heard that one?
No, I haven't.
They have that joke in many different forms.
Well, that's good because
Africa, it could be, anywhere.
I guess you have to learn to Yeah, with all the drummer jokes, you have to learn a few to sling the attention back on the bass player for a bit. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's so Spinal Tap. It's like we did that solo, it got even worse. Duff would come on stage and play with drums with me, and then he would do a bass solo.
Oh.
And that was really all designed so the rest of the guys could take a break. I'm like, why are they taking a break? I'm the one up here building a house. It's like, what do you mean they need to take a break?
Did you look forward to the drum solo every night, or was it a bit onerous?
Well, as in my book, I tell the story when I first joined Guns N' Roses, and I get this call literally hours before the show. And this guy that worked for Axl named Earl Gabadon, he calls me up and he says, Axl wants you to do a drum solo tonight. Well, I wasn't a drum solo kind of guy, to be honest with you. I grew up with Zeppelin and, John Bonham and all those guys doing big solos. Mm-hmm. And the joke was that's when you went to get a beer. That was always the joke, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I don't do solos. But that particular show, the first show of the Rock in Rio tour, the Rock in Rio show, my opening introduction to the band, I go into this solo and Axl leaves and the band leaves. And I didn't really have anything prepared. I just decided I would just play everything I knew all at the same time, And next thing I know, I'm out there for 20 minutes, and I'm just like loving it. I'm just like, all the lights are on me. There was no other band members. And I remember looking over and seeing Axl standing there like, okay, enough already. You know what I mean? If you go back and watch that YouTube video, I end up banging my head against, I had a gong, mm-hmm. And I was like, man, this is pretty cool. So it ended up, I did that every night for the rest of that band.
Wow.
Became a drum solo. And
mm-hmm.
and that was pretty apropos for the time, big arenas, big lights, I had smoke, explosions,
Well, you guys were doing like 3 hour plus sets. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was a good break for Axl to be able to go back and take a break. And, I would go out there and I would do 10, 15 minutes and people go get a beer, whatever.
Right. Or 3.
Yeah. I was cool with that. If they come back more drunk, we just sound better. So
right.
Go drink. I don't care.
So obviously your book, Double Talkin Jive, I've been going through that voraciously. Was that your COVID project? Was that what you spent 2020 on?
God, no, it took so much longer than that. People don't realize how much goes into these damn books. It's like, it's interesting though. It started probably, I'd say 2017, believe it or not. It's been about 4 years.
Uh-huh.
And the process was very cathartic. And it was interesting to write it and then read it and then redraft it and then re-edit it. And, I should have said that different. I want to say that different. And it changed me a lot. I really highly advise it for anybody. Write a book, even if you don't put it out.
Yeah. It's like, what did it change? What did it change for you?
Well, it showed me how much I've changed, which I was, a young man, and we were all, it starts out, when obviously you read the beginning of the book and I'm kind of a mess and, rock and roll 101, completely, obliterated.
From page 1, it is, 100 miles an hour.
I thought, hey, man, I might as well go with the flow. And I just did what every other rock and roller did in those days. Mm-hmm. But I came and crashed and burned. And then basically when I started writing back through that progression up to that point, it starts out with a crash and burn. And then it, goes back to my childhood. And people maybe get a little bit more understanding in how I was brought up and why I became a drummer and, my background and growing up in the 60s. God, if you watch Mad Men, the television show, everyone's drinking and smoking. And that's how it was at my house. Mm-hmm. Like my mom would pick me up as a baby and she had a cigarette in her mouth and a drink. It was like, that's just how we grew up. I'm not saying it's bad or anything. It's just, mm-hmm. So when you grow up in that period, and then when you see the transition into the 70s and when the drugs come and, at first when you're getting into rock and roll, hey, I'll do a line of coke. Cool. And then that's like, starts out fun and then it goes off the tracks,
Yeah.
So I went off the tracks. So that was interesting to read it and write it and then read it back and then go, oh man, I want to say this differently, because and there's certain people in the book that were a very big part of my life, and I don't have any ill will feelings towards anyone, so I want to kind of like give my truth, but actually give them accolades at the same time, because it is what it is, and it was what it was. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times in rock and roll, that really makes for great bands. And regardless of what's going on behind the scenes, that's what makes that energy special for a great rock band. And that happened with the Cult, Guns N' Roses, of course, and Velvet Revolver. I had 3 interesting characters of band members that we all came from kind of fucked up backgrounds, and probably why we got into rock and roll in the first place, right? It's like that was our outlet to be rebellious and get up there and throw down and party and do everything else that went with it.
But the book seems very, to me anyway, obviously I was there, but it seems very truthful. It doesn't read gossipy. It's not something that would, that is there to have yourself look differently than others. It just seems to be an effort to put the truth out there and to tell your story. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just want, I've always been a pretty straight shooter, and to my fault at times. Mm-hmm. If you read the book, I was the one that was always sort of like, hey guys, see, I grew up with 2 brothers. So we were like, brothers were like, hey man, we kind of just.
You have to learn to negotiate.
You got to just say it how it is, man. You got to stick up for yourself. And so I was brought up that way. I had to kind of, not that I was born in like, the Bronx or something. I was born in Orange County, but it was a little bit of rough road, and I had to be tough. Mm-hmm. And when I came to Hollywood, that was even a tougher road. It was like, people always ask me, how have you done so well as a drummer? I said, well, I had to kind of get out there and stick up for myself and negotiate. Work, this doesn't come easy. When you read the book, it's like, it's not like I miraculously appear, it's like, everyone thinks, oh, he's in a rock and roll band, man. It's not really that hard to work, but it fucking is. It's like, you got to work, you got to come to Hollywood, you got to get discovered, you got to meet people. It's like, there's a work ethic that goes into that. And I think that's kind of what I say in the book. And then when I meet these characters, success comes. As we all know, success can be scary for people that come from Jack Hall. So I think all the attributes of that particular situation is kind of why I tell my story the way I tell it.
What struck me about the book is really how hardworking you were, really from day one. Very focused since the beginning. I mean, you knew you could be a drummer in a touring band from the moment I think you saw Kiss. You said, I could totally do that. And then it seemed to have been followed up by a work ethic. Where do you feel you got that drive from?
Well, I mean, I guess if you look in the book, it could have been driven a little bit by resentment, which is a weird thing to say, but almost like proving yourself. And I think a lot of times when you see people that really excel in certain areas of their life, they come from sometimes backgrounds that don't obviously nurture them in a way. Like sometimes when you see people that are born into wealth, or they're given everything, they don't actually care. So for me, it was the opposite. It was like, well, it's kind of do or die. The drive came from me really wanting to prove myself on a big stage. And I always, from the beginning of the book, when I see Ringo and then when I see Kiss, I'm like, I had such focus that it scared the shit out of my parents, especially my mom. And they were scared for me. Not maybe my dad not as much, because as you see in the book, he wasn't around really.
Right.
But I think that's where the hyperdrive came. It was almost a little bit out of resentment, a little bit out of fear. Like, I don't have any other job.
Necessity.
This has to happen because I'm not good at anything else.
Right.
And I guess that's what I would say to anybody. People ask me, hey, give me some advice. I go, find something that you're really good at. I don't care what it is, and go for it. If you feel inside intuitively that you're good at something, don't take a no. Don't take no for an answer, and go after it. If you have a vision, And that's kind of how I was. I was visionary in the stage. When I saw Peter Criss on that stage, my buddy said to me, I think you're as good as him. That was a light bulb. And then my teacher said the same thing, which I say in the book. When I was in high school, my teacher comes to me and he says, out of all the students I've had, I think you have what it takes to go all the way. And that was another like, oh my God, somebody just validated how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
And and then for me, being a guy that now goes and gives back to kids, I have a charity called Adopt the Arts. I'll do the same thing, but I'm truthful because I don't want to give them a pipe dream. If they come up to me and say, hey, do you think I could be like a professional? And I would be, I would be a little bit more careful doing that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see somebody that's really special, I give them some description of why I feel that they're lifts their self-esteem. Maybe they don't end up being a rock and roller, but they end up being do well in other aspects of their life.
It could be that spark, just like you had.
Self-esteem builder, man. When your teacher tells you, you got the goods, you're like, I do? You're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that all the time with my students.
So now it's very easy to look back at your career and say, oh, look at all the bands you were in, the destiny that you had. But in those early days, for example, when you had the auditions with Steve Vai or David Lee Roth or Survivor that you didn't make, how did you deal with that? How did you talk yourself through to keep going?
I don't think I was as spiritually aware of that I'm not supposed to be here and this isn't right for you.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, I gotta go practice. I gotta be more prepared. I didn't have the spirituality I have now where it's like, this is not in the plan. Right? One door shuts, the other one opens. I didn't have any of that terminology or connection that way.
Mm-hmm.
I do now, major way. I take everything like that. So then
you turned it into a message of I must work harder.
Yeah. It turned into like, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to be more badass. I hit the streets of Hollywood every night. There wasn't a night that I wasn't out.
Mm-hmm.
My thing was if I hit the streets and I stay connected and people know who I am and they see me play, and I don't think I even described it, but maybe I did. I think I remember saying that I was in 7 bands at the same time. I was constantly playing. I was constantly on stage. And then, a small town like Hollywood, the word got out. Hey, you guys should check out this Matt guy.
Mm-hmm.
And, when big auditions came, my name was top of the heap. It was like the other drummers that were big in the town at the time, which were Greg Bissonette, Pat Torpey, me, later on younger guys like Josh Freese came along. But there was a certain ilk of drummers in Hollywood that were up for those big gigs,
Okay.
Randy Castillo.
So there's one, and this is a vinyl record show, so we will talk about vinyl records here. By the way, are you a record collector? Do you listen to? Do you have a vinyl collection?
I have my own vinyl club called experiencevinyl.com. Check it out.
Far out. Okay.
Yeah,
Tell us about Experience Vinyl.
Well, my good friend Seth Frank is a big vinyl distributor. He came to me with this idea of, let's spotlight some vinyl records and let's start with yours. My second solo album, Fierce Joy, we put up on this website and we just started this club and people could chat and, talk about the records and then purchase the vinyl. And then we just started adding catalog. And if you check it out, we have an amazing roster of vinyl that's going down and we're doing really well. It's starting to build. Obviously, as we know in the vinyl community, vinyl is up. It's coming back. Mm-hmm. We've got, beautiful colored discs that you can purchase, and we've got collectible, cool art again.
Yeah.
I remember when I did my record cover, I did this picture of me in this space helmet. I always loved Bowie,
Yeah.
And I did and to me, that was what was missing. I'm like, I miss holding the record and looking at the art and the credits. And so we did that. We did that with Billy's new record as well. We have a bunch of limited series of collectible vinyl in different colors. So I love that. I love everything. I have a killer VPI turntable. I have 2 VPI turntables.
Ooh.
I have a VPI amp, and my other amp setup is Rogers out of New Jersey. Killer. And I could maybe send you some pictures if you're interested.
I'd love to see that. So describe for us your record collection. I imagine you have quite a few titles. Is there a specific genre you tend to dive into more than others?
Well, it's funny because I'm here in Palm Springs, so I've got my classic Rat Pack and Billie Holiday and Ray Charles. I started when I came out here. I was almost like I have this 1960s house. And, right around the corner from me was Bobby Darin's house, 2 blocks from here. And I got his stuff, Mac the Knife, and obviously Trini Lopez, who just passed away, was a Palm Springs resident. And he lived about 2 blocks from here. So this area where I live is very in the classic sense. So I went back and just started going into the archives, and obviously jazz, John Coltrane, Miles Davis is fun to listen to in the desert. So I've got bunch of that stuff. And I don't listen to a lot of hard rock here. I have 2 vinyl rigs, and I'm putting the other one in my new recording studio. And I'm going to probably keep most of my rock stuff over there, my Sabbath, my Iggy Pop, Lust for Life. I just got the entire catalog of the Rolling Stones released on Universal, the box set.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's it. It's got the lips on it. And then I was invited to both reveals of Abbey Road and the White Album that they did with Giles. And we did that at Capital A, listening to the remastered vinyl. Have you heard those?
Yeah, I have. They're wonderful, but I haven't heard them on a system like they probably have at Capitol.
Yeah, well, they had a big rig up there, and Giles was there, and they played it. And didn't do vinyl, though. They played it digitally, but they had some sick speakers. And, everyone was there in the audience. And it was really special because I don't think a lot of people realize the Beatles, sometimes it's 60 takes on one song.
Wow.
Like if you go on the new box sets, you'll see take 15 or take 20, or like I remember Day in the Life was take 64. It's like, what? Because in those days they had to get the whole thing live.
Yeah. And
then they would do some overdubs and the way they stacked and everything. But those guys talk about work ethic,
Oh, yeah.
Go in the morning early. They would get there whatever time. I think it was 9 o'clock from the documentary. If you watch, they come in and they go, what do you got? George Martin would say, what do you got? They start working on them. And then you go back and listen to the box sets. You can hear John just playing the demo, and then they work it out,
It's amazing how far they took music in a little less than 7 years.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, even talk about physical product, right? I mean, I talk about this with people that are interested in this NFT thing that's happening.
Okay.
We look at physical product of records when people actually figured out that they could sell a record and monetize music, right? And it wasn't very long before all of a sudden, let's say even the 30s, it's probably the early phase of that. And the 40s became more popular with big bands like Glenn Miller and, Benny Goodman. And now they had physical records. But in the 50s and the 60s is when we had the boom of vinyl and physical product, and record companies came in. And now we had, Capitol Records and Atlantic. And then the biggest boom in the history of music is probably the 70s, when they were just making the greatest music, in my opinion, of all time. Like you had Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Sly and the Family Stone, and Roxy Music, and like Bowie, and the diversity was so deep. And then along came the killer, digital, and said, well, we actually don't need physical product. And now people are like, God, everything's so sterile. I want vinyl. I want to go back. I want to feel like I felt when I was a kid. Why does that feel so good? Because you have to take the time to go listen to the record. You have to get off your phone. You can't just push a button. You got to sit down. You got to get a cocktail, and you got to be in it, because artists made records that way. Like when I put together the track listing with Billy for the new album, Billy, I wanted it to play out like a story. What feels good? What's the right tempo? What's the right pace? So if someone was to listen from the beginning to the end, it goes one song to the next. Oh, I want to pick it up here. I want to drop the ballad in fifth. You know, that's how we used to do it.
Yeah, it was an experience not just for the ears, but the eyes, the tactile elements. And if you only have digital streaming, you're kind of missing part of it. I always think of digital streaming as kind of a try before you buy. You listen to it, and if you think you want to explore it deeper, then go buy the physical product.
Yeah, and have that experience with the music that you love, and really, we listen to music because it makes us feel good. And now everyone's trying to like meditate and do yoga, and I'm like, that's cool too. But music is the greatest release for all of us. We know that. That's proven. Now, if people can get back to actually giving it the space and time that it deserves, and I think a lot of us do, I do. You sit down with records, I do. And I have people come over to my house. I'll have my vinyl on. Wow, so cool. Come on, man. We'll sit in there. We'll listen to some records. It's not background music. It's not. This isn't elevator music. This is art.
Yeah.
So
yeah. You have to actively participate in it.
Yeah, conversations about it like we're having right now. We're like talking about it in a way that's meaningful now,
What's a record that you have? And I know there's probably, 100 that may fit into this, but the one that comes to mind that you have the greatest spiritual connection to.
We'll be back after these messages.
Psst, hey. I gotta let you know about the Groove Washer record cleaner. The Groove Washer is the best record cleaner money can buy. I use it daily, and it not only cleans my records so they look and sound their very best, but the Groove Washer is also safe for long-term vinyl storage. I would never trust my vinyl with a no-name cleaner. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record shop and accept no substitutes. And if they don't stock the Groove Washer, just simply go to groovewasher.com and get 10% off with discount code VinylGuide10. That's groovewasher.com, discount code VinylGuide10. Write this down, AudiofileUSA.com. AudiofileUSA.com is a family-owned and operated record shop that only sells excellent and near-mint vinyl records. They somehow find the cleanest record collections on the planet, many in original shrink wrap, some still sealed, and AudiofileUSA.com makes these decades-old pressings available to you. AudiofileUSA.com has over 42,000 titles in stock, and you can dig through their website searching by artist, genre, or even label and find the deals. Bookmark it in your web browser now. AudiofileUSA.com, home of the Holy Grails.
Now we return to the program already in progress.
No limits. What's a record that you have? And I know there's probably 100 that may fit into this, but the one that comes to mind that you have the greatest spiritual connection to.
This is going to sound so weird, but I love Roxy Music's Avalon album. Isn't that weird?
That's not weird, but I'm imagining there's a story and something behind that.
I don't know what it is. If it connects to a certain part of my life that just seems completely carefree, or what it is. It came out in the mid 80s. I love that record, but then I love any record I listen to takes me back to a point in time, and we all know that, right? Like I was really into Genesis, early Genesis during Peter Gabriel's era. So when I listen to The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, it still takes me back to when I was like in high school and I was a Genesis freak. Transports me, and I love that about music that I grew up to when I listened to early Sabbath, Volume 4. I remember when I saw Sabbath in the 70s, how that inspired me. So I can't put any one record as it. I always say Roxy Music Avalon because sonically it was the best thing I'd ever heard at that point. Yeah, I think that was Bob Clearmountain probably.
Do you approach your records with a bit of the collector bug? Like, are you bothered if it's a first press? Do you look for a first press, or?
I don't go that deep. I know that I have people that do, like my friend Ross Halfin. He is off the chain, and he's got like Japanese first edition with extra cuts and still wrapped. And
have you seen his Led Zeppelin collection?
Oh my God. in CD. Like I had when I was a kid, I had that collection. I had everything in milk crates. And, when I came to Hollywood, I was just out of money. I had no place to even put the damn things. And I don't remember storage lockers in those days, even if I could afford one, So I remember taking them down to the record store and selling them for like $1 a piece. That hurt. But I just got really cool stuff. I try to make sure that they're done right and they're mastered right and they're not files are done properly, the reissues, like a little heavier weight.
So, for example, with Fierce Joy or Hardware, what are some of the things you would go out of your way to assure are there for the vinyl product?
Well, I did Fierce Joy on a double album because it had too much music to put on vinyl. As we know, if you go over 20 minutes aside, you start to dissipate some of the low end. And it starts to sound a little bit more squashed. So I went back and I said, well, let's do 2 records. Even though it was only about 50 minutes of music total, it made a big difference when you spread out the music on the vinyl. And I did that. For Billy's record, we were lucky because we came in right under 20 minutes aside. And I actually asked the label if we could go a little bit thicker on the weight, on the grams. But the particular album that's out is good. I think is it 120 grams? I think it is.
Okay.
I have to go check. I haven't actually seen the final product yet.
Yeah. Most new releases they're getting up to 150, 180. I think
I know.
It's becoming a bit of a standard. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I want it thicker, but yeah. So, it's like now we're getting into like, our ear. We're like, I've got a needle on my damn turntable. It's $2,000. I mean, someone could be playing it on, I don't know what they're playing it on, a Crossley turntable, like in my book, right? Remember those things?
Yeah. They still have them around. Yeah.
Some little needle that's basically just tearing a hole in your album. But
yeah. Those cartridges can break you. But look, if music is your life, that's where you invest. It's like I always say, it's like my golf game. There are some people who spend thousands of dollars on clubs.
Yeah,
I spend thousands of dollars on gear and records.
Yeah, that's cool.
So when you got involved with Billy for Hardware, you also took over the production spot, which I assumed, at another point in time would have been held by Joe Hardy.
That's right.
And I know Billy was very close to Joe. What was it like for you taking over that space?
Well, it happened with baby steps because Joe was such a collaborator with Billy. That was the first time I've seen Billy, like, he lost his musical counterpart. Obviously Dusty and Frank are his partners in crime, but in the recording studio, he had Joe to turn to for the sonic, landscape that he created with ZZ Top and on all those records, and also the 2 first solo albums. So when it came time to make the new album, Billy came over to my studio, Drax Studios, which I had in Hollywood, and we were just messing around. We hadn't really worked together in the studio before like that, like as me running the helm, And I brought my engineer, and then we just started chucking and jiving on some ideas. And one of the songs ended up making the record from that particular session, which is SGL and BBR. And that was the first song we recorded together. And then almost a year went by when I kept telling Billy to come to the desert. I said, Billy. And then the pandemic kicked in, and I was calling Billy more about that I was worried about him, right? He'd been on the road for 50 years, and what's he doing sitting at home? So I would call more like, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing? Is everything cool? Why don't you come to the desert? And this went on for a while. And then finally I kept showing him pictures of this place that we recorded called Escape. I said, there's a house here. You can stay there. You'll have your own house, because he likes having his own space. And one day he finally said, I want to come out there. And so we all came out to Pioneer Town, which is about 40 minutes from me here in Palm Springs. And we just started. and Mike Fiorentino and my engineer, Chad Slozer, who co-produced additional production on the album, came in, and we just hit it off, and we were having so much fun. But it didn't happen quickly. It took Billy trusting us. There was maybe a week went by where we were going through material. Billy had songs, ideas, and I kept saying to the other guys, like, God, I want to make some like early ZZ rock. I want to try to talk them into, let's strip it down. Let's go back a little. I mean, everybody, you know how it is. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Billy, let's rock, you know? Billy's like, oh, let's do like a Cuban thing. And, you know, I kind of had to nurture it and move it around. And for my own selfishness, I wanted to hear him riff. And what you hear is what you got from those sessions. And we would do about 2 weeks at a time. Mm-hmm. We would stay out there 2-3 weeks, and then we would go away, and then we come back. And we went back and forth about 4 times before we had 16 songs that ended up being the ones that you hear on Hardware.
Yeah, there's this amalgamation of boogie. I can tell there was a lot of input from the rhythm section on this. It harkens me back to the El Loco days.
Yeah, cool.
The real.
Well, Billy, you know, Billy plays bass. He plays everything. He's a drummer. Mm-hmm. You know, I played bass on one. Billy played bass on a couple. You know, it was so like loose. Mm-hmm. And there's looseness on the record. I mean, he had such success in the early 80s with those more program records, you know, Eliminator, you know, Afterburner and all that stuff, that I kept saying, Billy, let's go back. Let's bring back that, but come forward. How can we do that? And, you know, we didn't have like serious conversations like that. That's not how Billy is. It's more like just, you know, like when we wrote West Coast Junkie at first, you know, I was writing a lot of the lyrics for that. And I remember going to Billy, will you sing the word junkie? And I said, it's not about drugs. It's about a girl. He goes, well, it's about a girl. That sounds good. And then like Vagabond Man happened the same way. That was lyrically started with me telling Billy, I wrote this song. I wrote this lyric based on how I feel about you and your travels. And that, in my opinion, you're the real deal. You're a traveling minstrel. You're a vagabond. You're a gypsy. And that's how I feel about Billy. He's the real guy. He's not pretend. He's a guy that's traveled his whole life playing music for other people, for their enjoyment as well as his, but a traveler and a guy that can't really sit still. So out of those sort of relationships that we were having, these lyrics just started coming, you know. Mm-hmm. And when we wrote Desert High, we all sat outside. I remember we were out there. There we were in the middle of nowhere. You know, there was eagles flying by. And we saw 2 rattlesnakes in one day on our front porch. And we were in it. We were in the desert. If you watch the videos, that's not bullshit. We were out there. And I started talking about the Salton Sea and Graham Parsons. I said, you know, Billy, Graham Parsons died right down the street at that hotel. He goes, oh, Joshua Tree Inn. So we were having these conversations that turned into music. That's how we used to do it back in the day. When you look at bands and they have those first 2 or 3 records, that's them living together. That they're having that conversation that turns into this lifestyle that they're providing for this record. And I always wanted to do that. I remember watching Zeppelin doing the No Quarter when they went to the castle. You know, they were in this castle and the Stones, Exile on Main Street. You know, I'm like, I want to go to the south of France in a castle. You know, so, well, we went to the desert, but it was the same basic intent, right?
Well, it's a shared experience. And I guess we can contrast that a bit with what happened when you stepped into Guns N' Roses. Most of those songs were pretty much already written when you joined. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a raw form, you know. I think there was songs like Don't Cry and Dust and Bones. They had these like cassette demos, right?
But I know you had, and obviously you put your own flavor on those. You contributed to those, but it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's different. It wasn't that band conversation that you were talking about you had with Billy.
Oh no, but
right.
We spent a lot of time, especially Duck, Izzy, and myself, rehearsing those songs.
Mm-hmm. And
a lot of lyrics weren't there yet. There were some lyrics for like "Don't Cry," "November Rain." Axl came in and presented that song to us on the grand piano. And I remember saying, "He plays piano?" I had no idea, right? And that was presented to the band, like, check this out. And I was a little bit like, whoa, that's different, But in the book, like I said, I realized Axl's genius in that way, that he wanted the band to move forward, much like the bands that he looked up to, which was Queen, the Stones, the way the Stones, they got it. They tried everything, reggae, country music.
They didn't make the same record over and over.
Never made the same record. They were always looking for the next thing. Like Keith Richards went down to the Bahamas and hung out with the Jamaicans, and they went to India, and they went to Morocco, and they were looking for sonic inspiration. And Axl came with his piano, and he wanted to elaborate and go more epic. And he had a vision that said he wanted the band to be bigger than life, much like Queen did when they did Bohemian Rhapsody. It was this epic, almost beyond, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say pompous, but, overly inflated epicness. And when he was doing that, we were like, oh shit, I was like, okay, let's do 9-minute songs. I don't care. I come from progressive music. I love Genesis, whatever. And there wasn't that conversation like he talked about. We just did it. We didn't argue about it. It's like, if the song's 9 minutes long, maybe I said one time, do you think this is a little long? Maybe I said that, maybe, but I don't think so.
Well, it seemed to me like those songs, and again, I'm suppositioning because just through your book, but November Rain was Axl's vision. Double Talkin Jive, I think, came from a riff that Izzy was playing, so that's probably following his vision. But with Billy, you guys shared this joint vision. You formed it together. You kind of fused it, which is, I'm saying neither is right or wrong, but it sounds to me like you enjoyed that collaboration.
Oh, I loved it. It was probably two of the things I've done in my life that are probably the height of my career is touring with Billy Gibbons and now recording with Billy Gibbons. Because, like I said, there's a certain genre, there's a certain ilk of musician that is just, special. And it's almost like a great actor. It's like a Marlon Brando of the guitar. It's like they just kind of are that thing. And you're, like I said, I'm a fan. It's not like Billy's going back listening to Tres Hombres and Fandango and Rio Grande Mud, right? He's not like going back and going, I'm going to check out what I played. But as a fan and somebody that's trying to pull some of that early stuff that obviously as fans we all love, right? That was kind of what I was feeling. I said, it's almost like, we want that from you, Billy. We want to hear that again. And I was like, and
from a very selfish place too. It's like,
when he started playing the riff, the Lucky Card, down, I was like, that's it. And I came in banging, like big rock, and I was like, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, Velvet Revolver, the same thing. I remember when we made that record, it was that conversation. I'm like, at the time we were 40-year-old guys. I'm like, we need to come out like a punk rock band, balls out. Like, if we come fucking sauntering in with some retro rock riff, we're just going to be a bunch of old guys. So we were like, we were on fire.
Yeah.
And that first record, you can tell that we were all fired up and we had something to prove again. It was like we were re-energized as young men.
Right.
That, and the intent going in was like, okay, we're all going to eat egg whites, get skinny, fucking play rock, maybe watch the drugs, like,
at the beginning, at least. Yeah.
In the old days when you're in your 20s, you're like, do drugs, play rock. And then you're in your 40s, like, smoothies, play rock. You know,
Egg white omelets. Yeah.
yeah, but that's what we did. We had to do it. It was a different kind of like putting on your uniform for the fucking, rock show. And, we did that.
Now, in talking about some of your experiences, one of the things that, I mean, there's so many areas we can dive in, and I know we have a limited time here. The Charles Manson cover on the spaghetti incident.
Yeah.
When you guys were doing that, what was the conversation like? Was there any discussion about it being outrageous or having a negative reaction like it did?
That was Axl's thing. He got a hold of the demo, the original demo that was running around. The story is that demo was going around Hollywood, and that demo could be a lot of the cause of the end of the story. Managers turning him down, and then him becoming friends with the drummer from the Beach Boys and Dennis Wilson. So when Axl said he wanted to do it, I remember that some of the other guys were not real keen on it. And I was basically instructed to come to the studio. And in those days, the band said, show up. I just showed up, So I remember going down to Rumbo Studios with Axl. And it was basically me and Axl. And I want to say, I can't remember who played guitar originally, but it wasn't Slash. And it wasn't Izzy. The demo version of that, to be honest with you, I don't even know if Duff and Slash appeared on that track. I think it's just me.
Okay.
And obviously the repercussions that came down after that were like, oh my God, it hit the newsstands that we'd covered that song, and David Geffen pulled the plug. Got pretty upset because we hid the track.
Right.
Listen to the record and it kind of is hidden. Remember in the old days, it would go by for like 30 seconds and it would come on. That was at the end of Spaghetti.
And that's why I figured, okay, there must have been an understanding of how potentially inflammatory it was, because it was hidden until the very end.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we ever spoke about it like that. I don't know if Axl's intentions were to, disturb people. I think he liked the song. And he used to wear that shirt, on stage all the time. Charlie Don't Surf. And it was a picture of Charles Manson on his shirt.
He's very good at being provocative.
Yeah, it was provocative. And that was a backlash for us. That wasn't like good rock and roll press. I remember we ended up, making sure that everything was handled with the estates of those families. And it was weird. It was a weird thing. It was a very serious situation, but I don't think we went into it with ill intent, from what I recall.
Yeah, I would have never assumed any malice, but just the notion of it being there and the potential, like I said, reaction, which was the ultimate result. And really quick, again, I want to remind the audience, Matt's book, Double Talkin Jive, goes deep into many of these tales of his time on the road with Guns N' Roses, with the Cult. I don't want to repeat all the stories in the book because obviously there's no time and everyone should read it themselves. But you've got some very interesting perspectives and helping re-understand what was happening during the time. For example, the Metallica show where James got his arm burned, telling a completely different perspective, which seems to make quite a bit of sense. The recording of the Use Your Illusions. Again, I'm so glad this book exists because it documents such an interesting time in rock and roll from a very unique perspective. So that's Double Talkin Jive, rarebirdlit.com. I noticed with the book, there is a vinyl soundtrack to it. Can you tell me a bit about that soundtrack?
Oh, cool. So the guys over at Rarebird are really cool. Like they sent me a vinyl audio. It's like a teaser that Mark Lanigan had done from Screaming Trees, and it was also in Queens of Stone Age. And Mark's got such a cool voice. He's got this lower kind of like very Leonard Cohen kind of thing. And then he sent me one from Angelica Houston. And I was like, he's like, can you do something like this? And pick like 10 pieces of the book and then come up with a soundtrack. I said, well, God, you want me to write an album? And so I did. And basically what happened was my friend Chad Slozer, who I did the Billy Gibbons record with, lives here with me in the desert. I called him up and I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create like a soundtrack for this audio reading. And I've got 10 pieces of the book that I picked out. I actually have them written down, but we're going to write soundtracks for each one. And I've got an idea for this one because it's very heavy. I'm going to play bongos and we'll have a bass riff and with fuzz. And we just started discussing it. We did the whole thing in 2 days.
Wow.
We compiled all the material. And then I drove to a different studio up in Joshua Tree with an old friend of mine from the band Blind Melon, Christopher Thorne, who's got this killer spot on 35 acres. And we went in there and we compiled all these tracks and it ended up recording all the guitars and the bass. And then I went in and played drums and some percussion. And then I basically did a spoken word thing over these pieces of music. And the music...
Is it a book reading or is it...
It's more of a book reading. It's like a straight... Okay. But it's got a little bit more energy because like I tell like the story where I joined Motorhead and I got this like, well, Lemmy called me, and then the music kind of drops down below the voice. Right? It's like a soundtrack. So we did 10 songs, 45 minutes. I went over the audio bridge, but for vinyl, but and we pressed it on vinyl, and we're going to release that as an extra little bundle that you can get of me, because I'm not doing the audiobook. I'm going to do, I have a baby coming. So they were like, I was like, can you do the audiobook? And I ended up getting a professional guy to do that because that takes like weeks on end. So I said, let me do the audio sampler. And I've, obviously it took me 4 years to write the book. So we're good. So I did this cool audio sampler so people could hear my take on things and my voice. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So Matt, thank you so much for sharing all that information with us here. I'm going to give the listeners here essentially 2 homework assignments. Number 1, get the new Billy Gibbons LP hardware. It's available now. It's on streaming. It can be enjoyed within moments. And then it's also available. Pick up the vinyl as well. The second assignment is to pre-order Matt's book, Double Talkin Jive. It's at rarebirdlit.com. I'll have a direct URL in this episode page. Grab the book. There's autographed vinyl, like Matt just described. Very unique package, and enjoy the whole adventure. Again, the book goes all the way through Matt's life, tells lots of stories, a lot of details on some pivotal moments in rock and roll history, and it's a must-read as far as I'm concerned. Double Talkin Jive from Matt Sorum. And again, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the Vinyl Guide, and you are welcome back anytime, man. Anytime you want to talk records, music, we're here.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, there we go, Mr. Matt Sorum right here on the Vinyl Guide. Make sure to check out experiencevinyl.com. Go to rarebirdlit.com for the book. And of course, pick up a copy of Billy Gibbons Hardware. It is a phenomenal record. Check it out. Again, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the Vinyl Guide. And that's it for this episode of the Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in and taking the time to download and enjoy. Again, I want to encourage everyone to please share these episodes across social media. Tag us, tag your friends, tag your enemies, put them out there, share them on Facebook, tweet them out on Twitter. I'm sure all your friends and followers have some level of interest in the sort of stuff you like to do, probably record nerds themselves, maybe not to your level, certainly not as handsome as you, but let's all be leaders. Please put them out there, and that would be super duper helpful to us. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.